back out of their houses, and this is a pretty exciting moment for the Chamber of Commerce, and so I'm looking forward to this ComFish. So I'm Jeff Sanford, president of the Chamber of Commerce, Kodiak Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to ComFish Alaska. Thank you for joining us today. We'd like to start by honoring Congressman Don Young and all that he did for Alaskans and our state. He attended ComFish in the past, and he will always be appreciated for his support. Thank you to our sponsors, Highmark Marine this morning and Northrum Bank. We are grateful for your contributions. This year, we are doing our forums in a hybrid manner. For those of you joining virtually, hello. At the end of our presentation, we will have a short question and answer session. For those of you online, please send in your suggestions or questions via the question and answer box, and we will gather your questions along with those in the Zoom. And with that, it's exciting, kicking this off for the first time in a couple of years. We'll move on. I want to introduce Matt Allward with a D, president of the United Fishermen's of Alaska Association. Matt, would you come up and welcome to Kodiak?
Thanks, Jeff. Morning, everyone, and welcome to ComFish Kodiak. My name is Matt Allward, and I'm the president of United Fishermen of Alaska. It's great to be back here in Kodiak this year and to have the opportunity to visit with friends and familiar faces. With the passing of Congressman Young earlier this week, we thought it'd be fitting to spend a few minutes talking about what an advocate he was for the commercial fishing industry over the last half a century. It's my honor to be here to speak a bit about the Congressman's legacy, but first I'd like to turn it over to UFA's new executive director, Tracy Welch.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Welch, and I'm the new executive director for United Fishermen of Alaska. A big thank you for the warm welcome and to the ComFish committee for allowing us to speak for a few minutes this morning about the late congressman. Earlier this week, the UFA board met and held a special meeting, unanimously voting to induct Congressman Don Young into the Alaska Seafood Hall of Fame. We thought, what better place to make this announcement than amongst fishermen and supporters of the industry here at ComFish. Copies of the press release will be available at the UFA booth throughout the week, in the back, and online shortly. While it's impossible to summarize the body of work that Congressman Young put together over his time in Congress, it's safe to say that the fishing industry would be in a much different place than it is today had it not been for the Congressman's support. Turn it back over to Matt. Thank you.
Over the years, UFA has worked with the Congressman on a multitude of fisheries-related issues, and his office was always open to us. Whenever we met, he was more than happy to tell us that the Magnuson-Stevens Act should have been named the Young Studs Act because he was the one who dragged it across the finish line. During the Congressman's lengthy tenure in the House of Representatives, he was successful in introducing, shaping, and advocating for legislation that protected and elevated the Alaskan seafood industry. While his accomplishments are way too many and numerous to list individually, fisheries-related highlights include co-authoring the Magnuson-Stevens Act, authoring the Young Fishermen's Development Act, working to bring fisheries disaster relief to Alaska fishermen in times of need, establishing a loan program for new entrants into the halibut fishery, working to continually increase the variety and volume of wild Alaskan seafood used in USDA food aid programs across America, and implementing legislation and international treaties to protect Alaskan fisheries from foreign threats. Although Congressman Young had spent 49 years in DC working on behalf of Alaskans, his work was not done. His legacy for the industry continues on today. In the months to come, we hope that the current bills that he had sponsored pass into law. And with that, I want to pass it off to Teresa Peterson.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for the nice tribute to Representative Young, who will be missed. Well, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon. Some of you back in DC, and it's my honor to introduce Dan Sullivan next. Dan Sullivan was sworn in as Alaska's 8th United States Senator on January 6, 2015. Senator Sullivan serves on 4 Senate committees vital to Alaska, the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, the Armed Services Committee, the Environment and Public Works Committee, and the Veterans Affairs Committee. As a champion for Alaskan fishermen, Sullivan has fought hard relentlessly to strengthen the fishing industry through expanding markets and bolstering marine sustainability. Since coming into office, Sullivan has passed 2 major pieces of marine debris legislation, obtained a permanent exemption from the vessel incidental discharge regulations, increased enforcement and international cooperation against illegal fishing, closed a loop that allowed foreign caught fish to be served in the National School Lunch Program, and pushed for an Alaskan to lead the National Marine Fisheries Service. Also secured tens of millions of dollars in relief for communities and fishermen impacted by fisheries disasters, championed funding for fisheries surveys, stock assessments, and other critical marine and environmental research, and secured a provision that ensures all future trade agreements include fisheries as a primary negotiating objective. Sullivan's work on recent North American and China trade agreements is expected to bring hundreds of millions of dollars worth of increased demand for Alaska seafoods. So with that, we'll turn it over to Senator Sullivan, and thank you for joining us today, Senator. We're working through some logistical challenges here on the tech, but we have a tech team right on it. I think we'll have you up in just a moment, Senator Sullivan. Oh, Senator, can you please
guys-
unmute? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we have you. Thank you.
Okay, good. Oh, Eric and my team are all here, but well, look, I'd love to be there with all of you right now. And so thank you in turn, the Kodiak Chamber and Matt and Tracy and everybody. It's great to see come back in action with everybody together physically. And I know, and I'm sure I speak for Senator Murkowski, we'd love to be there physically as well. Thank you, by the way, for the tribute to our great Congressman Don Young here, and so much that he got done, not just for our fishing community, but for the whole state. And Senator Murkowski and I were on the Senate floor last night paying respects to him. There's so many members of Congress who have stories. I always love talking about young studs. You know, that's what Don thought it should have been called, not MSA, but we always kind of called it that to him. But he's irreplaceable. And you know, to be perfectly honest, it's going to be a challenge. We're not going to have a replacement for a number of months. Senator Murkowski and I were talking about that. We already have some congressmen over in the House keeping an eye on his legislation, both offense and defense. But we are really going to miss this great Alaskan, great friend of so many of ours. So thank you again for the tribute. And I want to thank all of you also. Let's face it, it's been a few years. There's been few sectors of the U.S. economy, the Alaska economy, that have been hit harder than our fishing sector during the pandemic. And I just want to thank all of you for the great work that you did. Boy, heroic efforts, frontline, keeping our industry going and viable during a really challenging time. Again, we were honored to work with so many of you over the last 2 years on some really major legislation, whether it was the CARES Act and specific funding for our fishing industry and that, whether it was the paycheck protection, getting that 1099 fix with all of you working on that with us, the different trade programs, the $500 million trade program that was so vital coming out of the USDA. It was a long list, and really it was teamwork. It was me, Senator Murkowski, Don Young, and all of you. And I think we've learned a lot during this challenging time. But I want to thank all of you. A lot of those ideas that I just mentioned were things that came directly from the community, from UFA, from time for questions. So I'm going to try and be a little bit brief here. Never a great quality of mine being brief, but and an update on what we're working on here with regard to our incredible fishermen and fishing sector. H-2Bs, we're always focused on that. We had some decent progress on this issue recently. We need to continue to try to get a long-term solution on that. You may have seen that the infrastructure bill was passed. I think that's going to be hugely important. Senator Murkowski played a key role. We all played kind of a critical role in different committees, but with regard to Coast Guard infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, the opportunities that are going to come from that way beyond just those areas, I think is going to be really, really interesting. Yeah, so I think that significant accomplishment that we were able to get this year. You know, we're still working on the issues that related in our Coast Guard bill that we're working on now, the FCC and Coast Guard on the automatic identification system devices to work with regard to fishing gear, exempting commercial fishing vessels on the Global Marine Distress and Safety Service carriage requirements. These are all things we're hearing directly from all of you. And these are going to be building on the last two Coast Guard bills where we had significant wins, the indefinite delay on the alternative safety compliance issue, and the removing vessel classification requirements for vessels less than 180 feet. Let's talk a little Cody, that was already mentioned. Fine in the law last, you know, I always Don, that wasn't named after you. That was actually for a young fisherman, but I think in honor of him, let's just say we 2 weeks ago, we're finally able to get the American Fishery Advisory Committee Act passed unanimously in the Senate. I want to do a shout out to Eric on my staff. He did some very important jujitsu with Senator Schumer's office to get that over the goal line. We've been very focused on in regard to our act with voting federal stakeholder panel of experts to synthesize existing salmon research and identify, importantly, the holes that we think exist, and they're pretty significant, on federal research that we need as it relates to what is happening with our runs, particularly on some of the big rivers, the Yukon, the Kuskokwim, but other places like Southeast. And then finally, we've been working a number of issues on trade. And even up until just a couple minutes ago, we were working on trying to get a unanimous consent agreement on the bill Senator Murkowski and I recently introduced, the U.S.-Russian Federation Seafood Reciprocity Act. In the meantime, as all of you know, we've had this ban on American seafood to Russia, with Russian seafood essentially coming in almost duty-free to our American market. Completely unfair. That's existed for over 7 years. I had a call with the National Security Advisor, the Secretary of Commerce, and just 2 days ago, the Deputy Secretary of Treasury, in making sure that the Biden administration, when they announced that they were going to ban the imports of Russian seafood, we were like, great, finally, someone's doing that. Congratulations. Thank you, President Biden. But we need to make sure that that also includes the transshipment of Russian seafood. As you know, the vast majority is about $350 million of imports of Russian seafood go to China first, and they get filleted there, and then they're sent to our market. We are trying to make sure that gets blocked, in addition to the about 60 million of Russian seafood that comes directly into the US market. We know that's been unfair for years. We finally have an opportunity to address it. We're doing it with the Biden administration in terms of an executive order, but we're also trying to pass our legislation that would make this permanent until we get an even level playing field with the Russians in terms of seafood trade, which we haven't had for 7 years. So thanks again, everybody. I look forward to your questions. We really wish we could be out there. And thanks again for all you do for our great state, our economy, employment. You know, it's so important. Your industry, our fishermen, and getting through the last 2 years was difficult, challenging, and we just appreciate the opportunity to work with everybody to finally get this pandemic hopefully put in the rearview mirror for good. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Senator Sullivan, and we sure hope to see you and Senator Murkowski here in Kodiak next year. We certainly value your work that you do there, and we certainly know that you value us, so much appreciated. Well, next we're going to hear from Senator Murkowski, Alaska's senior U.S. Senator, and she is a third-generation Alaskan, proudly serving as the first Alaskan-born senator. Senator Murkowski has always been a strong advocate in Washington, D.C. for Alaska's world-class fishing industry, particularly through her role as a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, including the subcommittee overseeing NOAA funding priorities. Senator Murkowski has secured a significant funding to support priorities such as fisheries and marine mammal research and management, NIMP surveys in the Bering Sea and Gulf of Alaska, emergency fisheries disaster support, implementation of the Yukon River Salmon Agreement and Pacific Salmon Treaty, and the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund. Senator Murkowski is co-chair of the Senate Oceans Caucus, which provides a platform for the senator to educate her colleagues on issues like illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, marine debris cleanup efforts, and the blue economy. Murkowski has led the charge in the fight against GE salmon for human consumption, including successfully requiring the FDA to mandate labeling of GE salmon for American sales. Senator Murkowski understands that fishing is a way of life for many of her fellow Alaskans and supports federal policy that secures its thriving, sustainable future. Thank you and welcome, Senator Murkowski. Senator, could you please unmute yourself? Then we.
Good heavens, talk about rookie mistakes. How's that? Teresa, thank you. I appreciate that. And to the Kodiak Chamber, thank you for once again bringing everybody together for ComFish. Matt and Tracy, thank you for recognizing Congressman Young. As Dan has said, this is hard for all of us to know that we have lost our partner here in the Alaska delegation, a man who has served Alaska for 49 years. In many ways, it's so fitting, 49 years for the 49th state, because Don Young was true blue for his state, and we will miss his leadership, and we will certainly miss his leadership in the area of the fisheries. And it has been noted by several, his contributions, everything from Magnuson, Stevens to the young fisheries, all all that he has been doing will be missed, but he left a legacy in his wake, and we don't forget that. So I want to make sure that we do have time for questions, because I think this is a great opportunity for us to hear from you, and also to provide further updates to our Washington, D.C. report. And I'll try not to overlap too much from what Senator Sullivan has provided by way of legislation, but let me speak first with regards to the appropriations bills that we have just moved across and that have been signed into law. FY22, we finally got that over the finish line a little bit late, but the good news is we kept the government open, and we got all 12 appropriations bills through, as well as some additional legislation that was important to include, not the least of which was a reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, something that in our state we pay attention to for all of the right reasons. With regards to the appropriations, for the first time in now an even 10 years, congressionally directed spending allocations were allowed for, provided for. We more commonly known as earmarks, whatever it is you want to call them, whether it's congressionally directed spending, earmarks, it's basically returning to the Alaska taxpayer those dollars that they have prioritized within their region, within their communities, within their state. So there were about 65 different projects that I had included within the appropriations bills. Congressman Young had been aggressive in this area as well. But for the fisheries, of particular note is funding that we included for the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission to expand adoption of electronic monitoring there within the fisheries, something that we've been working to build out for a long while. So $2 million there. We also provided additional resources for the Division of Geological and Geophysical Surveys for the coast and coastal and nearshore mapping of Alaska to improve the navigation of our coasts and waters. There was $1 million for the Alaska Research Consortium Seafood Processors Ammonia Refrigeration Certificate Training Program. What we hear is that there is a strong need in this area to have more with their certification. So standing up a program to help facilitate this was important, as was funding for CANA, for the Kodiak Area Native Association, to conduct testing for paralytic shellfish poisoning and study the impacts of harmful algal blooms on the community. So those were just a few quick ones to let you know that we are targeting in the fisheries areas with regards to these directed funding, and are looking forward to this next appropriations cycle. So we'll be reaching out to you for input on that. Within the broader appropriations bills, I did work hard along with colleagues to make sure that Alaska fisheries projects are prioritized by our federal agencies. So we're going to see additional funds for fishery surveys and observers, as well as greater support to address transboundary mining. We continue to hear a great deal on that front. You mentioned marine debris. There is support within the appropriations bill more broadly for marine debris, as well as implementation of the Pacific Salmon Treaty. We've also included increases for the National Sea Grant College Program and report language to prioritize training for young fishermen. An issue that had come to us earlier in this year was the operations there at Little Port Walter, the research facility, and NOAA's effort to try to close that off. So we have included language that requires NOAA to continue its Chinook broodstock development operations there at Little Port Walter. We're all trying to figure out what more we can do when it comes to understanding the salmon in our waters. So now is not the time to be reducing salmon research in the state. So we're going to continue on that one. We push out on the integrated ocean observing systems, research on ocean acidification. And again, more support for understanding these harmful algal blooms. The funding for Salt and Salt Kennedy grants for promotion of seafood and our fisheries, that was maintained at steady levels here. Fisheries surveys. This is something that we talk about a lot, making sure that our surveys stay on schedule. We included an additional $10 million over last year's appropriated levels to make sure that we're staying on top of this. We have report language that includes no fewer than 6 Alaska bottom trawl surveys. Again, to make sure that we're not getting behind. COVID was not good to us when it came to the surveys. We need to make sure that we're not losing ground there. Teresa mentioned GE salmon. We're continuing to push back on that, again, requiring that if this awful fake substitute is going to be allowed to be sold, consumers need to know what it is, and it deserves to have clear upfront labeling. And so that also is addressed within the appropriations bills. So we're done with FY22. We expect that the president is going to lay his budget down. I'm hearing as early as Monday, so we'll be able to see top lines from the president's budget very soon here. And we're going to be looking to you. We're going to be coming back to you to help determine where federal funding is needed to support our commercial fisheries in FY23. So stay by for my calls. Here in Washington, D.C., obviously all eyes are on the situation in Ukraine. I think everyone that I am talking to, all the folks back home, everyone wants to know what more we can do to help assist our friends in Ukraine as they defend themselves from this awful, unprovoked brutality that we're seeing, this attack on their homeland. And I think we know, well, there's a lot of miles between Alaska and Ukraine. There's strong connection between Alaska and the country of Ukraine. When it comes to our seafood, we have more than 2,200 temporary seasonal workers from Ukraine who at this time of year would be getting ready to join us for the salmon processing season. We continue to work, as Senator Sullivan has mentioned, the H-2B issues. On another front, we're actually working with some in the Ukrainian parliament to provide some of our surplus canned salmon. We've got, it's literally protein in a can, and you have people in Ukraine, you have refugees that are in need of humanitarian relief, including food. So we're working, I've raised this with the president, I've raised it with USAID. We're working to make that happen. Senator Sullivan mentioned the effort that he is leading, and I'm working with him on the U.S.-Russia Federation Seafood Reciprocity Act. So I won't go further into that other than to say, you know, if American and especially Alaskan seafood can't enter Russian markets, then Russian seafood doesn't have any business being allowed into ours as well. So again, continuing to push out on that. Blue economy. This is an effort that I've been working on with colleagues here to make sure that we're continuing to grow the overall economy, and particularly the blue economy and the value that we see coming from our fishermen and our coastal communities. We talk a lot about finfish and shellfish, but we also need to recognize the advantages that we have with commercial kelp, seaweed. We've got good initiatives underway within Sea Grant. Southeast Conference is doing some good and interesting things with the mariculture industry there. So a lot going on that front. Disaster declarations. This is something that, again, just keeps coming up with so much frustration attached to it. We all know the Secretary of Commerce recently announced the disaster declarations from this backlog of requests going back to 2018. We have to have a better process. You just cannot have this black box where you have a disaster happen, it's declared, and then it just you're waiting indefinitely. So we've made some progress with the Fisheries Resource Disaster Improvement Act, which has passed the Senate, establishing these timelines for the declarations. But we need to be doing more. Senator Sullivan and I have been working aggressively with the administration on this, but it's just that it's almost just seemingly not worth it when you are waiting years after the declaration. The only thing that I might add that hasn't already been raised, because Senator Sullivan has mentioned some of the initiatives trying to better understand salmon. We had our roundtable in December. We've introduced the Alaska Salmon Research Task Force Act. We've heard some really good constructive comments and suggestions that we've been receiving through our online portal on that. So thank you for those of you that have weighed in and responded there. And then last observation, and this is with regards to the Coast Guard. They announced their spend plan for the funding that it received under the bipartisan infrastructure legislation that we worked so hard on. And out of the $429 million that we provided for the agency, nearly half of it, about $210 million is going to come to base Kodiak. And this is a situation where you're really going to see rising tide lifting all boats as we think about the benefits of that law. We're going to see $130 million for the fuel pier replacement there. Very, very important. But equally important is recognizing that we have to care for the men and women of the Coast Guard and their families. So $40 million for new housing for Coast Guard families there, and another $40 million for a new child development center, which I know is very, very welcome. But that's good funding, directed funding that we're going to see there in Kodiak, going to help our Coast Guard that came through this infrastructure bill. And I want to end my comments by acknowledging the work of the congressman in this. We were able to move that infrastructure bill through the Senate and got a good bipartisan showing for that. That was important, but it hit political headwinds on the House side. And Congressman Young looked at this bill, realized how important it was going to be for the state of Alaska, all over the state. And he said, yeah, I'm in, I'm going to work it. I'm not only going to support it, but I'm going to work it to make sure that it is signed into law. And I really credit Congressman Young's effort there. When I think about those fitting legacies for a man who's given so much to our state, we're going to see a lot of that playing forward in this infrastructure bill as we fully implement. So I've talked long enough. Let's move to the questions and answers, because I know you've got folks that want to weigh in, as you always do. But thank you for making this happen for both of us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, senators. That's a really impressive list of accomplishments that you two worked together with Representative Young to move forward to support the state of Alaska and the fishing industry and the Coast Guard. So I think first off, just thank you. Let's give our senators a round of applause. You're very much appreciated. All righty, well, I'll open the floor for questions. Yeah, if you could step up to the wireless mic, everybody can hear well that's listening online. Thank you.
Good morning, you hear me? Yeah, good morning, Senators Murkowski and Sullivan. I first want to acknowledge that you're working a very heavy workload with a heavy heart with the loss of your colleague. Don Young is Alaskan legend, and while he was alive, and I'm sure the stories will grow, his passing, and my thoughts go out to his loved ones and his co-workers and all the folks that care about him. But I want to thank you both for all the hard work and supporting the fishing industry. Clearly, I sat at a UFA annual meeting in Juneau one time and listened to Senator Murkowski data dump on the group, and it's always incredible what you guys are what you manage to accomplish. And I'm sure there's many items that are left on the work pile. I'd like to bring the Pebble Mine back up to the top of the discussion. I'm a Bristol Bay fisherman of 40 years. I don't want to go on about what I've done or who I am, but I have been tapped to represent the fishermen of Bristol Bay many times as a spokesperson, and served in many of the watershed and industry organizations, and been fighting Pebble for 20 years. I really appreciate you both taking an opposition stand against this mine. It's a horrible idea. And would like to just get an update on where we're at. You know, we really need the 404C exemption to permanently set aside this permitting process. And then beyond that, work towards permanent protections for the watershed. Looking at the salmon fishing overall, you know, with all these different stress points in the industry, you know, Bristol Bay is forecast for 77 million fish this year, all sockeyes, no hatcheries, you know, all wild fish. It's clearly the most eco-rich and abundant watershed salmon producing habitat in the world, unparalleled. And, you know, we need to make sure that we recognize its value and as we move forward. So just a little bit of the question is really, where are we out on Pebble, the 404C exemption specifically, and longer term protections after that? Thank you both very much.
Well, let me take first hit at this. As you know, following the Army Corps' final record of decision back in 2020, determining that this project couldn't go forward as proposed, I issued a statement, and you know, Dan did as well. I have made declaration, if you will, that we need longer term protections for the region that can just ensure that there are enduring values for Alaskans. I had indicated that I felt that a legislative approach would be preferable to a 404C for a host of different reasons. But most notably the precedent that the agency determination would yield. That's not the delegations to determine, that's the agencies to determine, that's the administrations to determine. As you know, the 404C is moving forward. And we understand that there should be something out in that regards within the next several months. What I have tried to do is engage stakeholders to determine if there is a legislative proposal that we can agree to, that would again provide for these protections that ensure that you've got this extraordinary, sustainably managed fishery, the most extraordinary fishery in the world with regards to our salmon, and still allow for a level of economy out in the region. So I have put some draft concepts down on paper. We're moving it around. We're shopping the ideas. We're really trying to not only provide for protection within the region, but also to bring Alaskans together. Pebble has been such a fight for so long that we don't want to try to advance something that will just further exacerbate the fighting and the tension that we have seen. So it's not easy, but I made a commitment at AFN during the 2020 convention. I said I was going to do this, and I'm continuing that work to try to develop the legislation. While at the same time, there's kind of that dual track, if you will, of the agency moving forward with its 404C determination. We did have the administrator for water who was in Alaska about 3 weeks or so ago, Radhika Fox. And I know she had conversations with individuals in Alaska at the same time. And I have had ongoing discussions with her. So it's kind of a roundabout answer of saying we are continuing to work this, in a manner that I feel will provide the most enduring protection, which I think is legislation. But the agency continues to move forward with its pursuit of a 404C.
I'll just add briefly to that. I think in this case, the Army Corps did its job based on science, not politics. That's what we had been encouraging them to do for years. And I think the process worked in terms of the final outcome from the Corps. And I think that's important for the state because, all of us, and I know so many of you, we want to be able to have resource development projects, whether it's fisheries or other sectors, building roads, building infrastructure. All that requires a process based on science, and if it can't meet the high standards that we have in Alaska, then it shouldn't go forward. That's what happened here. That's certainly why I oppose the project. So I think that that's a really important aspect to where we are right now. And I've always seen the 404C process as a backstop to that, but I do think it's important. Interestingly, I was just in a meeting with someone today, said there's these new ads on TV about Pebble. I've seen a few of them. I'm not sure what they're driving at. From my perspective, the project is dead. And with regard to the backstop, I think it's something that we need to look at with regard to what kind of work we need to do with the state on this. But to me, the key issue here is in many ways hearing from all of you that the process based on science move forward in the way that I think the outcome was the one that was dictated by what could or couldn't happen in that region. And I think that was the right and final outcome.
Thank you, Senators. Yeah, I agree. We are a state with high standards, and the value we put on fisheries has led us to where we are today. Do we have any more questions? Come on up to the mic. Thank you, Bruce.
Good morning, Senators. Can't have a dull moment here, so I'll take up the space. I've never been bashful about that. There are too many things to even mention. The whole thing with Dawn is just the weirdest thing. It's still every day. But I want to just thank you both for the work you're doing at the moment on several things. Senator Sullivan, I don't know how Eric did it. You're gonna get him a Superman shirt to figure out how he got that our AFAC bill, the American Fisheries Advisory Act, uncoupled. I don't know what he's got. He's got pictures on Schumer or something. I don't know, but hallelujah. Congratulations. It's the second time you've done this to get it through the Senate unanimously. And what poor timing on Don's part is all I can say. Here it is. He's up to bat now with his version of the bill, which is the same. So we're hoping we can get that. I want you to know that we've been working to crank up the support for that, to get it through the House for the last couple of days. And I think that support is going to be pretty big. So far, all the reactions are good so far. I had a great conversation yesterday with a group of people from across the country about the ongoing effort on the H-2B visa and the different options that there are. I know you guys are working on it, and I talked to one of our processors yesterday. As 500 people coming in from Ukraine. Did have 500 people coming in from Ukraine. Those people are obviously now not coming. And we got big problems as fishermen. You know, everybody looks at the visa thing that it has a problem with the processors and stuff, but if they can't process the fish, we don't get to catch them. So your work ongoing with that, any kind of even a Band-Aid, I hate to use that word, but because we're using that all the time, but a fix of some kind would be more than welcome here as we're just a couple of months. So anyway, all the above is great. We're looking forward to a new harbor, Lisa, with your infrastructure money, whether we get it or not, but at least with that whole infrastructure bill that you guys were able to get across, those options are now maybe on the table where they haven't been. And I just can't thank you enough for everything you've done and are doing daily. Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce.
Well,
Keep
hey, Bruce,
pushing.
I'll take a quick, I'll mention real quick, because you've obviously played a key role on the AFAC issue too. So thank you. And you're right, Eric deserves a medal on that. Sometime over beer, I'll give you the down and dirty on how he got that unstuck. But as you know, that was always we were always kind of taken hostage between New York and North Carolina, one of their fishing disputes that we had nothing to do with, and they always kind of roped us into that. The key now, and I really appreciate you mentioning the House, you know, I've already reached out to a couple members, and this is actually a really important issue, in the House, who are close with Don, kind of saying, hey, look, I know you got to represent your own state, but can you help us out a little bit here, both on offense? You know, there's a lot that Don Young wanted to get done. This is a big one. And of course, anything that he's trying to get done, Lisa and I have been working on trying to get done. And then importantly on defense, right? I mean, I don't want to go too far into it, but whether it's on fisheries, you know, the 30-30 stuff, or, you know, monuments, or other attempts to lock up the state of Alaska, there are members in the House, in the majority, who would love to shut down our state, love to shut down our fisheries. And, you know, they didn't have the guts to take on Don Young when he was there. But now I worry a little bit, right? That they're going to see, hey, we got an opportunity, probably 6 months until a congressman or member comes from Alaska. That's a long time. So we're asking members to keep an eye out for us on defense too. So if you guys are hearing anything, you know, nefarious in your connections, let us know, because right now, and it's really weird, and it's just bizarre. We don't have a member. Years, this giant of Alaska, man of the people, was defending our interests, promoting our interests, getting things done. We don't have anyone right now, and so we're tapping people to help us and keep an eye out for it. AFAC is certainly high on the list, but we gotta keep an eye on defense too, and so that's what we're going to be doing.
Thank you, Senators. I'm going to read a question that came in online now. Thank you for addressing Pebble. Can you speak about the groundhog project next to Pebble and their application for an exploratory permit with the Natural Resources Department with the state of Alaska?
I'm not informed enough to know what has been applied for within the state on the project. I mean, we know that there are mineral interests certainly within the area, but I can't speak to the specifics of that. I don't know if you can, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, some part of the reason these interactions are so important is to get updates out of that. So maybe if we can get a little more information from all of you guys on that, but that's, I'm not familiar with that. Whatever the project is, I'm not familiar with it.
Thank you, senators. And I would encourage the person that posed the question to go ahead and reach out to our senators. They're certainly there to listen to us. Do we have any more questions from those in the room? We have a few more minutes here. Come on, Kodiak's never been shy. Sure. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, step on up.
Mike again here, senators. I would just like to rebound on that comment and say that there is looking at this for 20 years, there's some people here in organizations that have a lot more accurate information in real time about all the exploratory boom that's happening in the watershed of Bristol Bay. But we're definitely at risk of seeing the Bristol Bay watershed turn into a mining district. And the Pebble was the small version of Pebble, which was a disingenuous, had an $8 billion build out. And the power structure for that mine would have supplied the mine that's been recently permitted up north, as well as any other adjacent mine, as well as the transportation corridor and all that infrastructure that was, so dangerously jeopardizing the environmental, the ecosystem, the intact ecosystem of the area. And so just being aware that there was 20 baseline studies being performed during the overall last decade, and I think it's really getting ramped up. And there has been a lot of mining interest in the area, and they feel they have a legal right to extract resources from the area, and without somebody getting in the way, it's going to continue to become it's going to be whack-a-mole. It's going to continue to pop up. We're going to have one permitting process after the other. Many baseline studies have been performed. And so just being aware of that, the groundhog is just the current next version of, basically an encroachment into that habitat. Thanks.
Well, and if I can just comment to that, Mike, because, as people have raised just this exact concern that, you might be able to put, you might be able to take the Pebble project off the table by way of a 404C, but what is to preclude another project from coming forward? And so again, if this groundhog project has actually submitted an application to state DNR, that is, again, obviously we need to be more apprised in terms of what that specific may be, but that's why I have suggested that if you're really going to talk about what the permanent protections are, that's where legislation comes into play as opposed to a 404 process.
Thank you. And thank you, senators. And thank you for those comments, Mike. Terry, do you have a question for us? Thank you.
Thanks, senators, for being here. Senator Murkowski, you speak of a legislative fix for Bristol Bay. What might that look like? Are we talking about specific legislation that would protect the entire watershed from mining activities permanently?
Well, that's exactly the part of the conversation. How much would be incorporated into the area that you are defining? What are we talking about in terms of whether it is effectively a buyout of those state leases? Whether it is a land exchange that might be a better fit. These are exactly the types of things that I'm saying let's put out here on the table. And believe me, we've had folks on both sides of the issue weighing in and saying, well, that's an awful idea, or that's something that can work. But part of that would be, how much are we talking about? How are we defining this, these protected areas? Is it just the pebble leases themselves that you would take these leasable minerals off the table, or is it broader? And again, that's why you have to have the real review and analysis, and bringing in the stakeholders, the people that are out in the region, that live there, that rely on the fisheries and the health of the fisheries, bringing in Alaskans into this process. So it is not yet defined, and that's exactly it's exactly where we're trying to get is how are we defining what these protections might look like. So how you can help in this as we're moving forward is part of what we're trying to do.
Thank you again. Thank you, senators. Well, we're just coming up on 11 o'clock. If anybody has one more question, we could probably squeeze in one more. Oh, we have an online question. Let's see. Okay, let me read this. We have a question. What's your best piece of advice on how fishermen can be effective on issues in Congress? That's a big one, but we love to, we want to be effective here. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I don't
I'll
know.
take a
I think
crack at
Alaska's
it.
fishermen are doing a pretty darn good job of being advocates on their own. Whether it's UFA and the leadership that we see there visiting back here, Bering Sea crabbers advocating on their issues. I don't think you all need lessons in advocacy. You're your own best spokesman. And so don't underestimate the impact that you have when you make these trips back here. Don't underestimate the impact that you have when we bring policymakers to Alaska and we say it's important that that you sit down with these fisheries groups. This is a mainstay of our economy. I do think that it has been hard during COVID because advocacy over Zoom is just not quite what we want it to be. I happen to think that the fish fry that you have and that you participate in over the NOAA offices, I think that's a great way to talk about all the innovation and everything that you're doing and why we need to make sure that we're using Alaska seafood and not Russian seafood. So I don't know that you need a lot more tips other than to keep doing what you're doing. And Dan would know you're dealing with it all the time with them on the Commerce Committee.
Well, I think you guys are great advocates, and my view is, to the extent we can get to consensus on issues, it's not always easy, that's for sure, but that's helpful. But when you're making the case to us, we get it, we understand the issues, we love working with all of you. But I would say, let us help you in terms of your trips out here, not just our meetings, but meetings with other senators, meetings with other members. You have a great story, a great product. I mean, who doesn't love American fishermen, right? And then I actually think this is an important issue. We made some really good headroads into the USDA in the last administration. Secretary Perdue became kind of a promoter and supporter of the American fishermen, of the Alaska fishermen, that trade program that they put together, almost $500 million. 16 of the 19 products were Alaskan. That was huge. The new guy, Vilsack, not so much. And, wait, why do I care about fishermen? My view, he's kind of a pain in the ass. But the ability to get out here and meet, not just with members of Congress, but other agencies, to set up a day to go to USDA and say, hey, this is why you should care about American fishermen, even though you don't have a history of doing that. That's the kind of stuff that we can expand our kind of Alaskan fisherman fan base among other members of Congress, other senators, and even other agencies beyond Commerce and NOAA. And I think that's a great opportunity, and we can certainly coordinate with you guys and help on that. But yeah, you got a great story, great product, great ethos, and the more we can sell that here to a broader audience, the better.
Well, great. Thank you very much. That's a great note to end on. I know we've taken up our allotted time with you, although I think we'd enjoy talking to you both all day long. But with that, senators, we just want to say, on behalf of Kodiak, the largest and most diversified port in the state of Alaska, we thank you very much, as well as all of those listening online. And just want to end by saying, rest in peace, Congressman Young. You will be sorely missed. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks all.